I drive for Uber, and believe it or not, I don't have many strange occurrences. Or maybe I'm just used to them, but Judy, well, she's a different story. It all started when I picked up this lady on Sunday. I don't often work on Sundays, but every Sunday I do. It's very strange. There's just something about Sundays. So, I picked up this lady at some senior care center. Even though this lady walked up to my car with a walker, I noticed that she was full of energy. She was very friendly. Dan had bright pink lipstick on her lips. She was full of vigor. She climbed into the front seat and told me I was taking her to Catholic Massachusetts. What happened next was that her story got even stranger. She told me that she was not Catholic, but had once wandered into a Hispanic Catholic prayer meeting when she was looking for a place to pray to herself. She told me that although she doesn't understand a word, she now attends Hispanic Catholic services whenever she can. She also told me that she is a breast cancer survivor. She has one separated daughter. She used to be a counselor, a dog and horse trainer, that she travels the world, that her heart is failing and that her husband of 30+ years is cheating on her and stalking her. I'm sitting here thinking, wow, this is the craziest life ever. Is this woman telling the truth? Truth can be stranger than fiction. The best way I can describe it is that her stories sound crazy, but in conversation she seems pretty normal. So, I pull up to the church and drop her off. I get out of the car to put her walker in, and she comes over and snuggles up to me, hugging me tightly. She asks for prayer and begs me to tell her what is bothering me so she can pray for me. She then tells me that she considers it divine intervention that we met, and asks for my phone number so we can meet again. I am also a photographer, and she wanted to take some pictures of her and her dog at her house, which she said she lived in her whole life before she had heart surgery and had to be in a senior rehab center. She also told me that her ex-husband tricked her into signing a contract to sell the house while she was in the hospital under heavy medication, but the house hasn't been sold yet. And we can meet there for a photo shoot in a few weeks. A week or so goes by and she calls me. She says she has a ride to the house and she wants me to meet her, look at the house and sketch out ideas for photos. I agree. And driving even further into the middle of nowhere to get to her house. Let me tell you, this place was in an unmarked forest. You had to drive on an unmarked road to get to an unmarked road to get to another unmarked road, etc. And her house stood literally in the middle of the woods. If you didn't know this house existed, you wouldn't have stumbled upon it by accident. And I should add that while trying to get to her house, I took a wrong turn and ended up getting my car stuck on a dirt road that was very steep. I was stuck between the trees and thought there was no way I was getting out. Judy went down the road on her walker and shouted directions until I finally got free. I get out of the car and look around the lot. It takes my breath away. She has a wooden gazebo that she and her husband built, and when she was a counselor she used to hold her sessions there, and the backyard is literally a forest. She asked me to look around for about 20 minutes while she washed her hair in the trailer she was staying in on the property. She told me that due to complications, she couldn't be in the house before I went exploring. She told me about her crazy ex-husband. She said that he had been stealing her mail, that he sent people who drove by her house slowly and followed her, that he had clipped her fence and let her horses out, and recently poisoned her 2 dogs. I still wasn't sure that was the case, but I asked her if she had called the police. She replied that she had, but that it was complicated. She said the police had given her a new cell phone and that he wouldn't be able to get her new number. Oh yes. She also said that he was a computer wizard and that he was always hacking into her computer and stuff. So now I think Judy has some issues. Still, why pass up the opportunity to explore this beautiful area and keep this lady company? So with the thought that Judy was crazy, I went back into the woods behind her house and started exploring. First I came across a small cabin. Curious, I looked inside and found jars filled with what appeared to be scientific experiments. I'm not sure what it was. Later, when I asked Judy about them, she said, "I'll tell you someday, dear." Shortly afterward, I walked up the hillside and out into a clearing where I saw a bunch of trees that had recently been cut down. Judy said the Forest Service was getting rid of some of nature there, so I didn't find it too wide. However, then I came across two piles of smoking sticks. I found what appeared to be two campfires that had been recently extinguished, and it looked to me like someone was trying to cover up the evidence of them being there. I get back to Judy's house pretty quickly and tell her about my findings. She immediately said, "Oh no, he's camped out again and is watching what I'm doing." It follows, "Don't worry, it won't kill you, just me." I asked her if it could be a fire from the Forest Service, but after thinking about it, we decided they wouldn't leave it smoking. And not at 7:30 p.m. on a Saturday. Just as we were getting in the car, a maroon pickup truck pulled up across the street from us. I think this guy is watching us. Judy tells me not to look panicked, but to quickly get in the car to see if this guy is really working. I start talking loudly about him and pointing in his direction. He sees me and quickly drives away from there. And it was an unstable dirt road, no uphill or downhill. Judy tells me that surely this is one of the men her husband sent there to watch her without a walker and show her the dog, gets in the car and drives to the church. She gets out and goes to hand something over. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in the car with her dog. After about 20 minutes, I realize that she is freaking attending a Catholic Mass. I had to follow her and make her get back in the car. We get to the care center, and I help her inside. The night shift guy is in there, and he looks a little out of it himself. I look around. There are pictures of creepy dolls and old wallpaper on the wall. He asks her where she went, and she says we were at my house. To which he replied, "You've gone to the territory, we'll talk after she's gone." She replied, "I don't care, I can do it if I want to, they already know what I do, I don't have any secrets, do you know what's going on?" I quickly bowed out, promising to call again. We've corresponded a bit over the past few months, and at the moment Judy is moving out of the nursing home and into her own apartment. We're supposed to meet up in a few weeks, and as long as we don't wander off into the woods, I think we'll be fine. To this day, I don't know, for heaven's sake, what was going on. And I'm not sure I want to know. Perhaps I'll call the care facility and see if they can clue me in on who this person is. I am in contact with the person who followed us, and the person who was in the woods, and the person who owns those banks. I really hope I never meet or see any of you again. This happened about 6 months ago, and I recently used Uber for the first time since the incident, so I thought I'd share it with you. I was leaving a work event at a bar around midnight in a major city, about an hour away from the suburban home I share with my partner. For the record, I am a woman of about 25 years old with an average build. Not tall, not strong, definitely not threatening. And I was a little tipsy that night. I'm talking about 3 drinks, so I wasn't incapacitated in the slightest. Anyway, I usually take the company car home, but I didn't have it booked since I didn't know what time I'd be leaving. So I decided to take an Uber. The company would reimburse me for the bill anyway, so it didn't make a difference to me. As soon as the Uber pulled up, I said goodbye to my coworkers and sat in the back seat. I am always very polite to the Uber driver, so I introduced myself. This driver, let's call him ID since I don't know his real name, seems perfectly normal. No red flags. And we have a nice conversation for about 15 minutes until we get out of town on the road to the suburbs. From this pleasant conversation, I learn that he lives in a certain neighborhood, not too far from my house. Note that his neighborhood, while relatively close, is completely inappropriate for the route we take to my house. The conversation comes to its natural end, so I just get a little quiet and start looking at my phone, reading it, whatever. The silence is interrupted by his voice suggesting I take a nap if I'm feeling tired. At first it didn't even strike me as odd, so I just thanked him for the suggestion, but said I wasn't really tired. Then he said, "Oh, I always feel like taking a nap when I'm drunk. Are you sure?" At that moment, something in my body made me wake up even more than before. So I told him that there was no need to doze off. I'll be home soon anyway. He quit after that, but I still thought it was weird that he said that. About 5 minutes later, he says there is some weird construction going on the highway in the single lane. The traffic ahead will make my trip longer than it needs to be. He asks if I can take another lap. I agree, already worked up and just wanting to be home. At this point, my partner calls, asking when I'll be home, and I let him know I'm clear. I was talking to my lover. There was something strange about this guy, and I wanted him to know that someone was waiting for me at a certain time and knew where I was. After I hang up the phone, the Uber driver is silent, and we exit the highway at a different exit than I've ever used. But I guess that was to be expected as we were taking a different route home. I'm chatting on my phone because I don't want to talk to this guy anymore. I don't even look up until he tells me my house is only 5 minutes away. Okay, now I have a pit in my stomach. Now I'm probably 25 minutes away from my house, but that distance has increased due to the short drive. I talk some nonsense about how I love this neighborhood and that my boyfriend and I were thinking of moving here. Blah blah blah. Basically, anything I can think of to give the impression that I don't think it's weird and I'm not picking up any signals. Surprisingly, he says nothing in response and starts driving down the road that I knew led to my house. Crisis averted, right? Except not quite. With 15 minutes to go, my surroundings become more familiar, just as I'm starting to feel more at ease with him. He starts asking questions about my boyfriend. What does he do for a living? How long have you guys been together? And other seemingly routine questions. Finally, with about 10 minutes left in the meeting, he asks if my boyfriend makes me happy. He does, very much so. I just bragged a little and said that yes, he makes me very happy. Then he asks if I make him happy. I thought it was weird, but humor is my defense mechanism. And I said, well, I certainly hope so. We drive for about 8 minutes. He turns down a side street, stops on the curb, looks back at me over his head, rests, and asks if I would make him happy too. I replied, what? Mostly because I can't even fathom what's going on. He asks again, do you want to make me happy tonight? I thought about my options for a second. I'm alone with this guy sitting behind the wheel. It's dark outside, and I don't see any lights on in the neighboring houses. And I don't know what the hell this guy has in his car. By default, this answer is known to be a true barrier to men. I don't think my boyfriend would like it very much. His weird, creepy grin disappears from his face, and he says he doesn't have to find out. Come on, make me happy. I know a few ways you can start. I tell him that my boyfriend is waiting for me at home any minute. And besides, I love him. I don't want to hurt him. Could you please take me home already? I carry a small knife and a canister of mace with me, but all I could think of was to turn to this guy. The sensitive side. Somehow it worked. And after that, he didn't say another word. He just turned around and drove me home in silence. Oddly enough, I said thank you. I get out of the car, and that's it. I walk into the house and immediately start crying. For some reason, as soon as I hug my partner, he tells me that I should contact Uber immediately and tell them what happened so this guy doesn't try to take advantage of anyone again. I agree and open the app to file a complaint. Except when I looked up my last ride, the profile picture didn't 100% match the guy who was driving me home. The car was the same, but not the driver. The guy in the photo was swarthy and wore a turban. Maybe in his early 40s. The guy who drove me home was white and seemed a little older than me. Uber did not contact me and just refunded my money. I told the police about the incident because my partner insisted on it, but they didn't take me seriously since nothing really happened. I was worried for a while since the guy knew where I lived, but apparently everything is long forgotten since I just took an Uber today. The moral of this story goes like this. Always make sure that the Uber driver's profile picture matches the person driving the car. This story started on a Thursday night in May 2017. I work in retail, and one evening after a long shift, I called an Uber to avoid the questionable people hanging around near the train station. I wish I had known that the simple act of calling for transportation would lead to a 6-month ordeal of harassment and obsession. I got in the car and chatted with the middle-aged driver, whom I'll call Chuck. He had a strong Turkish accent and seemed friendly. The conversation went normally at first. He asked where I worked, why I was walking so late, what I was studying, etc. As the conversation progressed, he started making comments that made me feel uncomfortable. He started talking about how beautiful I was, how young I was, and how he missed the days when he was young and could get girls like me. Then he put his hand on my knee, patted it affectionately, and tried to move my hair away from my face. I was well aware that he was driving a moving car, so I just ignored him and prayed that we would get to our destination faster. As we approached our house, he noticed a car in the driveway and immediately removed his hand. He asked me if I wanted to go out for coffee sometime. I politely declined and said I had a partner. He said he was lucky and that I could call him any time for a free ride. Then he reached out and kissed her hand. I felt physically sick, but I thanked him for the ride and got out of the car as fast as I could. Once I was inside, I told my boyfriend what had happened. He advised me to report the incident to Uber. At first I was apprehensive that he knew my address, but I ended up reporting it because I knew we were moving soon. Uber assured me that the matter would be investigated and refunded the full fare for the ride. I didn't hear from him after that and was soon busy with school, work, and moving. I completely forgot about him until I accidentally ran into him at our coffee shop in August. I was standing in line for coffee when he patted me on the shoulder. My heart dropped. He smiled broadly and tried to hug me, but I refused. "Hi, I miss your pretty face. Where have you been?" "Oh, hi, I've been really busy, sorry I can't talk," I mumbled. I hurriedly ordered a coffee and sprinted out the door with him on my tail. He started walking beside me, adjusting to my pace. I started breathing hard and gasping for air. "Hey, I could buy you that coffee. We still need to go on that coffee date." I told him no, I wasn't interested, and he was making me feel uncomfortable. Then he physically grabbed my hand as we walked. I hissed, "What the hell? What are you doing?" He replied, "Oh, that was too soon." "Too soon? Too early for what?" "We're not on a date. I'm not interested. Please leave me alone." I said it loud enough for the people around me to hear me, and a few people started paying attention to me. "Oh, are you lesbian or something?" "What?" "No, I'm just not interested in you." I was shocked. I was officially speechless and started crying. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to upset you," he said and tried to stroke my back. I physically flinched and pulled away from him, so close to having a mental breakdown. He called out to me as I was walking away. "You still work at that cheap shoe store, don't you?" I realized that I had told him where I worked that night, and that he had picked me up and seen me in uniform. I also told him where and what I was studying. I couldn't believe my own stupidity. I alerted the store manager, and he alerted mall security, who assured me they would be on the lookout. Sure enough, on my first night shift after that run at the coffee shop, my manager told me that someone had come in and asked for my phone number, and when I was on my next shift, claimed it was my boyfriend. My manager refused to give out this information and immediately notified security. But by the time they arrived, he was already gone. They showed me the grainy security footage of people coming into our store around that time, and sure enough, it was he. I was told that if he came in again to hide out in the back and the other girls on shift would deal with them. A few months later, he tried to add me on Facebook. I immediately changed my name on Uber so I couldn't be identified anymore, and I blocked him. The most recent incident happened in September of last year. I was tidying the window display out the front of the store when I immediately felt like I was being watched. I looked to my left and sure enough, he was there. I pretended not to know him and said, "Can I help you, sir?" "Just admiring your beauty," he said with a smile. He then gave me an envelope and walked out before I could say anything. Inside was a card saying that he really felt a connection with me and thanking for my help today, and a voucher for the local bikini store for $100. I realize now is the time to involve the police, and I'm kicking myself for not contacting them in the first place. I haven't heard from him since, and I'm praying that I don't ever hear from him again. This happened about a couple weeks ago. I was going to go to a concert with a friend, but decided not to drink because I had early classes the next day. I go to university, in a city that is mostly filled with university kids and school months, which is important to consider in this story. So, since I don't have a car at school, I decide to take an Uber to my friend's house to relax a bit before we head to the concert together. The night goes according to plan, and she and I take a cab back to her place. The next day, I get a notice from Uber saying that I have to pay a cleaning fee because I threw up in the Uber car. At this point, I'm really pissed off because I know for a fact that I didn't throw up in this guy's car because 1. I was sober, and 2. We were chatting the whole time. So I'm grateful. This guy is going to try to scam $80 out of me because he knows my word is against his because I was the only one in the car with him. I reply to Uber that this is a lie, and they send me pictures of the car with vomit on it. And these pictures he must have saved from last time and decided to use them against me to reinforce his lie. At this point I lashed out at Uber, stating that this guy was lying and that he was trying to take advantage of the situation because I was the only one in the car. To my surprise, after about an hour of emailing them, they refunded me $80. I think, great, I'm done with this. And now I won't have to worry about it anymore. My mistake. The day after that, I get a text from an Uber driver saying that I left all my documents in his car and that he would meet me to return them to me. This guy was so cocky because I had my documents in my hand when I read his message. I told him about it and he said, "No, I have it here. If you want it, I'll give it to the police." At this point I stopped replying to him because it got a little weird. I didn't understand why this guy wanted to keep playing games with me. One more thing. I have a very unique name, and there's no way another person with the same name posted to Uber that night. So the odds of him being honest are slim to none. So, I go to bed and wake up in the morning with a voicemail from an unknown caller who claims to be a police officer from the police station, and they have my ID. I call back the local police department in the city and get no answer. Supposedly it's difficult to get through there for non-urgent inquiries, but regardless, I doubt that the police station actually called me because they couldn't have my ID. Also, my ID does not have a phone number on it. I live in Canada, so I don't know how different an American ID is. But either way, I'm pretty sure someone impersonated a police officer. It might have been my Uber driver, but I'm not sure. Anyway, about 2 days after the voicemail, my roommate is in the upstairs bathroom of our house, which faces the patio to the front door. She happens to look out the window and sees a guy standing on the porch, facing the door, with his hood up, just standing there. She's like, "What the fuck?" And watched him for like 10 minutes while she was going to the bathroom. 10 minutes is a long time to stand outside the door of someone else's house for no reason. It's also important to note what we need to keep in mind in order to approach our door. This isn't a street or anything like that where someone might be randomly standing. After 5 minutes, she goes downstairs and opens the door, expecting to see this guy to ask him what he wants. But there's no one there. That's how this guy stood outside our door for that long. Who knows how long he stood there until she saw him and left without ringing the doorbell or knocking. The next couple weeks were weird too, because we had a lot of times where the doorbell would ring, but no one would come when we opened the door. I got really weirded out by all of this and thought it must be related because it all happened in such a short period of time. I deleted the Uber app and any apps that tracked my location. It also scares me that the Uber driver knows where I live since he picked me up outside my house. Now I feel very uncomfortable and look over my shoulder more often than usual. I hope I never see this Uber guy again, and will probably only take cabs from now on. This story happened very recently, almost the end of last year. It's not a crazy story where I almost got killed, where I came face to face with the world's most notorious rapist. It's pretty calm compared to what I've read on this page, But still, it's really creepy and shows how dodgy it is. Uber really? Yes, I still use Uber now. Yes, because it's 10 times easier than the bus. But I make sure I always sit in the back and stay alert. I live in England and there are no sunsets in the winter. So I'm walking to the bus stop in the city center when it's completely dark. It's raining heavily, but it doesn't scare me because there's no point. I'm already soaked. The buses are very unreliable. They come either very late or very early. I must have waited 2 times for the bus to come, but it never did. I ended up just walking to the end of town and calling an Uber. I did this to cut the price of Uber down a bit. Life hack, if you will. A guy arrives, I get in the front seat, and he seems like a really nice guy. He's like an Indian version of Clive Rowe. Right off the top of his head. This guy acts really nice, smiling at me all the time and chatting about how my day went. I don't normally socialize with him, but since he was trying his best, I gave him a chance, talked to him about my day and told him about my work day. I was currently working in IT, so he was interested. I found it odd that the guy would completely turn his head and chest to look at me when he answered, even though he was driving. Then it got quiet and he answered the speakerphone and spoke in his own language. He was calm. Then he starts telling me about his wife, life back home and all that stuff. Again I am being polite and nodding to be nice because we were talking about my work. He starts telling me about how he makes money in his country, and I realize that this is what he was doing back home. He tells me all at once, but then he tells me again, changing the story a bit, and so he continues all the way home, telling me the same story over and over again. I keep nodding and telling him I'll try it soon. So I stop outside my house and he turns to me again and starts telling me about the job, asking if I'll try it. I was like, yeah, I'll try it. I barely understood what he was telling me though. I'm about to jump out the door and say, thank you, but the door is still locked. I do so very obviously. I want to get out by pulling on the door. I still don't understand why Uber's locks the doors, considering you pay through the phone anyway. Maybe it's just a safety issue. I don't know. So instead of unlocking the door, this guy starts telling me how to do the job. But this time he put on a pillow and grabbed my thigh. To someone I know, that might be a sweet gesture. But for some random Uber driver, it's over the top. I yank the door open, assuring him I'll check the work before he unlocks the door. The guy says to me with a creepy smile, "Will I see you again?" I'm like, yeah, maybe. This dude probably ended up having a heart attack at the mere thought of seeing me again. Luckily, I did get out. So to those Uber drivers who think it's okay to touch your thighs and not let passengers out, I'm definitely going to deny you rides if you approach. It happened about a year ago. I was visiting friends in a town about an hour away from where I lived by train. It was getting late, and the last train was due to leave in less than an hour. My friends lived about 10 minutes away from the train station by car, so I let them know I needed a ride. My friend who had offered to give me a ride earlier that day was too drunk, so he ordered an Uber to come pick me up. I usually just stay the night, but I was pregnant in my first trimester and needed the comfort of my boyfriend's bed. We didn't have much time, so when ordering the first car, he saw a picture of the driver and canceled because he looked creepy. The second one didn't look much better, but at least he seemed less creepy than the first one, which is ironic. He arrives shortly after I get in the car, calls my friend's name, which is a man, and I tell him that he just paid for it, but that he has the right person. He asks what my name is and if my friend is my boyfriend. I call my name and tell him that no, my friend is not my boyfriend. He compliments me. I thank him and try to put my headphones in. But he keeps talking to me about how I deserve a boyfriend or something. I have to say, I know the city very well. I've lived there before and spent a lot of time there. I know exactly how to get to the train station, and I always know the best route depending on the time. It was pretty late on a weekday, so there was no traffic. And pretty much any road in the right direction would get me there. He put the map in his Jeep, which is on the dashboard. It says to turn left at the next street, which is what you have to do to get there, since it's a dead end. We start driving. He suddenly asks, "Do the cops hang out there?" I get uneasy, but realize that he just wants to speed a bit. So I say, "Not really." All of a sudden he pulls into a narrow alley. Before turning left, his GPS tells him to turn around, but he's still going in the opposite direction. Then I tell him that's the wrong way, and he suddenly starts to listen to his voice, like it was just a mistake. Then he says, "I'll drive you, if you don't mind me speeding." I'm thinking, what the fuck, just get me to my train. I say sure. And he immediately hits the pedal and accelerates to 50 to 60 miles per hour, then hits the brakes before the stop sign. He continues to do this, following directions for 2 blocks, when he stupidly ignores the GPS and starts going in the opposite direction again. At this point, I realize that he has no intention of taking me on the train, and I write to my friends, telling them about the situation. They asked me to come back, but I am desperate for reassurance. So I try again and tell them I'm going to miss the train. That's not the way to do it. He tells me I won't miss the train, even though he has no idea when it's coming. We go over a hill and a new Camaro is following us, and he starts asking why the cops are following him. I don't answer anything, but he keeps asking and gets louder and louder when I don't answer, and he mumbles to himself. Eventually the cop car turns around, he calms down, and I notice the time. It's been 15 minutes, and I haven't even been within a mile of my friend's house. And I'm definitely not going to get on that train. I tell him to take me back, but he insists that I'll catch the train. I'm really sick of this, so I get mad at him and tell him he has to take me back. He finally agreed, but only after he slowed down near a bus stop where a girl was standing alone. He probably noticed my phone buzzing and lined up, so he finally calmly drove me back to my friend's house. When I got out of the car, my friends were already standing at the door, so I walked over to them. When I looked back to look at him, I saw that he had stopped his car at the end of the street and was talking to a hooded man standing on the sidewalk. I guess he figured I was a tourist and could take advantage of me. So I reported it to Uber and the local Uber drivers page in this city, and hope this never happens to anyone else again. It happened last year at the peak of my partying. I was visiting a friend's house, and at about 2 a.m., being pretty drunk, I decided to call an Uber for a ride home. A car pulled up and I made a habit of sitting in the front with the driver. He was a young man about 25 years old, and I don't really remember what we talked about, but I do remember that his compliments went from, "You're very pretty," to, "You're very sexy," and he kept saying that I reminded him of his mom. I thought it was really weird, especially since I was 19, but I tried to brush it off because I didn't want to seem rude. I asked him to swing by the burger place because I was hungry. We grabbed some food. He was supposed to take me home, but I noticed that he was literally driving in the opposite direction of my house. I looked at his map and kept urging him to turn around, so I asked him where we were going, and I remember him looking at me and saying, "Oh, you don't want to stop by my house." I remember completely sobering up and saying, "No, please take me home." I don't remember if we continued talking after that, but thankfully he drove me home and I never heard from him again. I also reported him the next day. What really upsets me is that he obviously knew I was intoxicated and tried to take advantage of me. I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't spoken up. It's safe to say that I won't be going out alone at night anymore.